on this computer. Hey, Jim, tell me, how do I see where my recording's going? How do you control
in
that?
the Zoom settings. So you have to look under settings on your video and see where they're going.
Okay.
Because by default, I think they go to the cloud, but I haven't done it enough to know.
Yeah. And I thought that, yeah. Well, I guess I'll figure it out later. Don't worry about it, right? Figure it out. I can always move it.
Jim, when you started earlier, I believe you set it up to record on this computer and then you paused it. But you should still be on that same setting to this computer. At the end of, when you stop the record, it'll do some converting of the file. And then at that point, it'll flash up where it is. But you'll be able to find it. It'll be on your hard drive somewhere if you did it locally.
Right. Just look for the biggest file, right?
If you look under the settings in the Zoom app under recording, it'll show you the path that it uses to record.
Let me exit full screen.
Yep. And go to the Zoom app and look at settings under recording.
Okay. Zoom app.
Yeah, also don't interrupt it once it started that converting process at the end.
Yes, yes, that's real important. Okay, we got to get some more people in here. Bob, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing good so far.
So far, okay.
Yeah.
We got a few non-hams here that want to be hams.
All right.
Brian, and we got my dad in here,
All right.
and we got Jim, and so we got some people who aren't hams in here too. So.
All right.
Let's see here.
There's at least a half a dozen 50ers in here too.
There are half a dozen what?
Rock and rollers.
Oh. Well, I don't know. I thought we'd have about 40 people tonight. I don't know where everybody is.
Don't forget, Jim, they have to remember.
Yeah. How many reminders do I need to send, Bill?
Never enough.
I know. Oh. Well, Bob, I think we should go ahead and get started. They'll just come in as they come in. I'll send out another reminder right now.
Okay. You have some rock and rollers here tonight?
Absolutely.
Then I guess I have to do my whole thing. Usually this thing is divided in half because the first part of it's about 25 minutes of my on the road with Keith Moon and, people like that. Yeah, I have some great stories about those people.
Yeah, we want to hear those. Hey, Joe Walsh.
They cost extra money.
Joe Walsh. I want to hear about Joe Walsh.
We don't have enough time.
He's one of the most famous hams, isn't he?
I would think so. Yep, I think so.
Well, for me to introduce you, I want to just say something here to start. So I'm going to kind of host a little bit, and you're the guest speaker. And I just want to tell you, So we met on the air, if you remember, on 15 meters on 21,300 back, I don't know, must have been 9 months ago, something like that. And I asked you about getting a microphone, and I bought a ICM in the boom, and for my 7300, I'm running 100 watts barefoot
Hmm.
with a fan dipole in my attic. In my attic, Bob.
Yep.
I've since had about 988 GX contacts
Wow. That's
to
great.
107 countries and having a blast. And I get through the pileups with 100 watts and without a beam because of your microphone.
Yep. It means a lot because, as I say so many times, it all starts at the microphone.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll get into that. We'll get into that.
Hey, Jim, do a audio check with Bob. He's a little low on the audio. And then don't forget to mute everybody.
Oh, I can fix that. How's that? That better?
Yeah,
Much better.
Yeah, I have a lot of little controls over here that I can make work better for you. Sound okay now?
Yeah, it sounds great.
Okay.
I'm sending. You want to go ahead and start, Bob?
Sure. We can make it happen. First of all, thanks for the invite. I really enjoy visiting clubs. This is one good thing of the COVID thing, I do believe. And we're just about to pass the 200 mark of clubs, and I just love it. And we're coming back 2 and 3 times to some of them because there's so much to talk about. But first, I want to get with the program here. I call this a science of audio, but it's much more. But first, let's take a little bit of time to talk about my history, where I came from and all that. I started when I was 10 years old playing the accordion, and I know you're going to say what all this has to do. It has a lot to do, as it turns out here. 2 years later, my parents bought me a Hammond B3. That was quite something. They weren't wealthy people, but they thought I should have that organ. And 2 years after that, I got a job making a lot of money in the weekends playing at a restaurant in Freeburg, Illinois. But it led to even more big things. 2 years later, I became the assistant organist at the Fox Theater in St. Louis. Now, why that's so important is Stan Can was the organist there, and he needed somebody to help him play different shows and stuff. But that organ hadn't been played in 20 years, and there are over 4,000 pipes from 1 inch to 32 foot, and they had to be tuned and voiced. Tuning is no big problem. Voicing is where I learned to listen. Listening is a mental process. All these pipes had to be in one level of whatever you figured you wanted. They couldn't be muffled, they couldn't be bright. You pick what it is, they all had to be the same. And that was something, as we'll learn later on, really led me into my careers, both of them. But in 1956, late, my high school buddy got a ham radio license, and I thought that might be pretty cool. So I was taking organ lessons across the street from Walter Ash, and I'd go over there and spend a little time. Well, when it come time to get the gear, I bought a Harvey Wells SX99 and an RME 152 converter. That RME, Harvey Wells is still with me. There it is right there. And if you get on 3885 at 9 in the morning, you'll probably hear it because I'm on the AM net about that time. And it was really something for me. I was a technician for 17 years. And the reason for that was that I I really didn't care what went on in the lower frequencies because 6 meters was open 24/7. If you weren't around in those days, I know it's hard to believe, but the sunspot cycle was huge. I'm tuning around one day and I heard this ridiculous signal. I thought, man, has this guy got a lot of distortion? It wasn't. He was on single sideband on 6 meters in 1956. Now that was something because sideband hadn't really become of age on the lower frequencies. And I tuned him in one night, and he was thrilled because nobody would come back to him. They thought he was all distorted. But I happened to push the right button, the BFO, on my Hallicrafters, and there he was. Who was he? He was K0DGE. And I told him I'd come in to St. Louis 3 or 4 times a week, and I played the Fox. And I have some time. I'd play for 8 minutes, and then the show would be going 2 or 3 hours. He said, "You come and see me." So I did. I rolled up in front of his address, and it was KMOX, CBS Radio. And I going, whoa. And I went in and met Larry Burroughs. And he showed me around the station, a 50 kW clear channel, CBS owned. It was a major piece of radio in those days, still is. And I said to him, "Hey, would you build me one of those sideband things? I thought that'd be kind of key." He said, "Nope, can't do that." I said, "What are you talking about?" Because I'm thinking, well, he built one. Why didn't he? He said, "But I'm going to teach you how." And he did. And it was the beginning of me becoming such a freak about building. First thing he had me do was build a Central Electronics 10B. That is a transmitter that has plug-in coils, but you build it through, but don't plug in the coils. He checked it out. I took it to him and he had it a few days. He said, "Everything's good." So I did really good there. He said, "But we need to build a coil for 6 meters." And he taught me, I bought, and he taught me how to use a grid dip meter. We had to take that and wind a coil for 6 meters and plug it in. But now we're still not on 6. How do you get from 14 megs to 6? He taught me how to use a Greene punch. Went across the street again to Walter Ash, bought a chassis, and I built a 6U8 36 meg oscillator and plugged it into the crystal socket. What do you got? 36 and 14, you're on 6 meters. The station really, really went crazy fast. I was just a nut. I had built a Heathkit Seneca. The Dream Receiver National just had come out. It was just incredible because I had a lot of time. I very seldom went to school. I barely got out of high school. I went as just a required number of days because I was making quite a bit of money at these theaters and playing. I also got into antennas. My loving parents allowed me to put up a 110-foot Roan, had a 36-foot long 6 meter Telerex and a pair of stacked J beams, and it was something. We had a local dealer. He was a Motorola dealer, and he helped me do all this along with a K9 EBA who was a contractor and had a hoist and a crane and all of that. It was fascinating times. The antenna was very special. It was a spiral array. And what had happened is Telerex, they were playing around with phasing. And you'll notice those elements, they aren't horizontal and they aren't vertical. They're a little bit of everything. And why they did that was they were able to cut down on the fading. You hear signals fade, and sometimes you wonder, well, he lost power or most times he's changing polarities. And polarity has so much to do because they're out of phase when they do that. And you can get 20 dB of loss just by having a different polarity. Well, the spiral array allowed us to kind of cut down on some of that, and it did. Well, the next thing I did in 1959, I bought and built a Johnson 6 and 2 Thunderbolt. You can see the central electronics above my head there. And this was really amazing. Put about a kilowatt and a half on 6 and 2 meter sideband. Little did I know uh, what where how rare I was. But I got a call one day from Bob Drake of the Drake Company. He said, "You the guy that's got that kilowatt on single sideband of 6 meters?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, we'd like for you to come and visit our club. We do an annual thing here in the club. We do it here in the local Biltmore Hotel, and we'd like for you to come and tell us how you did this." And I wanted to get Larry to go with me because, actually it was him. I just built it, but he was the instructors. And I flew out to the Biltmore. One of my friends that I'd met on 2 meters at home, he had a Bonanza and he'd heard about this meeting. It was pretty famous. It was held once a year. They had taken all the furniture out of one of the floors, and they had the Collins room, the Hallicrafter room, the Johnson room, the Drake room, Central Electronics, and all these people were there. These were people that, as a kid reading the magazines, they were like celebrities to me. And I was able to walking in and out of the rooms and meeting them. And of course, they were all geared up for me, and I didn't know what all the hubbub was about until a couple of them set me down and said, "Do you know you're one of 10 that we can count that have something on 6 meter sideband?" Well, I didn't know that. Where was this? Uh, this was the Biltmore in Dayton, Ohio, and there were 600 people in that Hamvention at the time. This was the beginning of the Dayton Hamvention. In '64, they moved out to Hare Arena. While I was there, a fellow from the UK came to me and he said, "Hey," he said, "we'd like for you to perform a test with us on one of our antennas. Could you do that?" "Why not? Yeah, I'm game." He sent me a 128 element array on 2 meters. And again, the Motorola dealer, K9 SGD and K9 EBA, the construction guy with a crane, helped me put all this together. Lord, I didn't know what was going on with it. It was in a spare lot next to our house, so the 110 foot stayed up with all the other stuff. So I was just a freak. Well, in 61, I had built the first 6 and 2 meter transverter. It was a band switching transverter. And that gave me capabilities of a little over kilowatt on 6 and 2 meters. And it was really moving quick. Uh, and I got a call from CQ Magazine, and they hired me to have a column called VHF single sideband. That's how rare that mode was at the time. And I also had written for VHF Amateur at the same time. And the cover of that particular one, that was a 6 meter transverter that I had written an article how to build it. It was very simple, had 3 tubes, maybe 10 or 12 resistors, a couple of coils, and away you went. So, I explained how to do this, and things are just going nuts. The station continued to grow. But I got a job at the Holiday Inn. This was the largest Holiday Inn in the chain, 600 rooms on one floor, across Lindbergh Avenue from the St. Louis airport. At the time that I started playing there, the 7 original astronauts would come once a month to learn about the space capsule. And they became really good friends. And I had built and installed a pipe organ in that 4-star restaurant. It was a first 4-star German restaurant called Schneidhorst. And I had the pipes all behind glass. It was really something because people would come from all over the country, busloads of organ clubs and so on. It became really, really quite something in those days. But I got tired of playing after 12 years, 6 nights a week. And in 66, I opened a little music shop. I got a Hammond organ franchise, and what else did I know? That was my dad standing halfway down in that top picture in the white shirt. He and mom had a clothing store, men's shoes and clothing and so on. So they that's why Marissa was my home, and I thought I would do it here. I didn't know what was coming. I really didn't. But I got this franchise and started selling Hammond organs. Hammond was a big deal. A lot of people had them in their homes, but I started cutting them in half and working with some of the bands around there. I started leasing and renting them to them. Those things are 300 pounds, so I'd cut a lot of the wood off and reduce the weight by 100 pounds. And I didn't know anything about the outside world of music. All I knew was George Wright, Jesse Crawford, all these great theater organists. But one day, the bands they discovered that there was this guy that had a soldering iron. A kid came into the store and he said, "You fix things here?" And I said, "Yes, sir. What do you got?" "I got my amp." And what is that? I had never seen a guitar amp. And I know a lot of people think this is crazy, but I didn't know much about any kind of rock music or anything else. All I listened to was theater organ music. And he threw this guitar amp up on my bench, and I said, "What's wrong with it?" "It's broke." "It's broken, huh?" I figured he tried to make it 12 and go to 12, and it only went to 6. Well, I looked underneath, and what did it look like? It looked like my Harvey Wells over here. It looked just like it. It had a pair of 6V6s, and it had a 5U4. Well, I knew what that circuitry was. A Harvey Wells had 6L6s. So I thought, aha, I got it fixed. And all of a sudden, bands started figuring out I was here. So many, many bands, and these are kids in high school yet. They didn't have big careers. People like Michael McDonald, all the guys from REO Speedwagon. REO hadn't been born yet, but of course the guys were just forming that band. Danny Fogelberg, all kinds of people would come to Marissa, Illinois. It soon became a really big deal. Well, I was renting these Hammond organs, and I'd take them into the different places, especially some of the big arenas like Kiel Auditorium and the Checker Dome, where the St. Louis Blues had played. And the PAs were terrible there. They were 30, 40 years old, little bitty 4-foot columns. I said, I got to do something about this. And so I did. At the time, again, there's so much in my life just happened. It was a blessing, I'm telling you. The Fox called me and said, "Hey, we're throwing out our old sound system. Would you like to have the big cabinets?" I said, "Sure. Hams don't throw anything away." So I rented a truck and went up to St. Louis, and those two big cabinets you see the guys standing on, those are Olson bins. They're 16-foot folded horns built in 1932. I put JBL 15 inches in them. Then we built some other cabinets, started a fiberglass shop and built our fiberglass horns. That's just one side of the PA. And things were really happening. Kiel Auditorium hired several times had hired a PA. One time they hired it on a Sunday afternoon deal they called the Cavalcade of Stars. They would bus some of the stars from Nashville. Every week they'd go around to Kansas City, St. Louis, Omaha, that thing. And when they'd come through St. Louis, they'd have this great sound system that I built. They were all freaked out about it. We're talking Dolly Parton and Porter Wagner, little Jimmy Dickens, all these guys, and I became good friends with all of them. Well, I get another call one day from the Fox. He says, you still have those cabinets I gave you a couple years ago?" I said, "I did. Why?" He said, we had this band come in here tonight. They got here at 4 o'clock, and none of their PA got here. It got confiscated by the DEA. I said, "Wait a minute, what are we talking about here?" This was a piece of rock and roll history. Many of you might know the story. Uh, it seems as if the Grateful Dead their sound man who helped invent LSD was on probation from the state of California. The DEA and the FBI found out that they were going to try to do this little tour of New Orleans, St. Louis, and on out to New Jersey. So they go to the show that night, sat in the back row. When the show was over, the band came on to St. Louis. They didn't have cell phones. Nobody knew anything. They just, we'll see you at 4 o'clock in St. Louis. Well, an hour or so later, when Owsley padlocked the truck with all the gear, the DEA and the FBI padlocked him, and away they went. So he says, the Fox manager said, why don't you talk to this guy? This guy was Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead. And he said, what do you got? And I said, well, I told him I got Olsen horns, a lot of JBL and Macintosh amps. You got Macintosh amps? I never will forget. He just went nuts. Nobody, I didn't know this. I just got them because I had heard they were good. Well, they were pretty good, yeah. And he couldn't believe that somebody had a system like that in Marissa, Illinois, or come to St. Louis, because they had never played through anything like that. So we brought the system up, and finally about 9 o'clock that night, we got them going. And because I had to bring a Hammond organ and all the speakers. This is just a little piece of it. This is the only picture I have. I didn't take very many pictures. I didn't want to be a groupie. I had a job to do. But it was very apparent that they were thrilled to death. And we became very good friends, Cherry and some of the guys that Bob Weir, and we still are. I miss Jerry a lot. I really do. But there was a guy there that night, a journalist, obviously. I didn't meet him, but he wrote a piece called The Night Rock and Roll Sound Was Born. You can go to Google and you put that in there and you'll learn what happened. And it was amazing. February the 2nd of 1970. We hit the front page Billboard magazine at this little music shop in Marissa, got the Grateful Dead concert. Oh boy, things really got crazy then. I had all kinds of people calling me. And so we had built another system, and I ended up with about 30 people working for us, and it was really something. But being a straight man in a crazy world, you're looking at a guy that has never to this date tasted beer. I've never smoked a cigarette or anything else. I haven't done any drugs. So I was a straight guy in a really kind of crazy world. But they respected me for that. And I respected them for their artistry. And I could do things for them. I learned soon that helped them. And that's why we respected each other. When they would come to Marissa, Illinois, many of them did. They were very, very tame. And they only got a few minutes with me, so they made it count. But what was really crazy about it is these groups would, one guy in the group would have a Volkswagen van and he'd take a few of the amps, another guy would have a pickup truck with the lights, and they'd never get there at the same time, sometimes not at all. The show didn't happen. I said, that is the end of that. We were the first company to do busing and trucking. I leased a 40-foot semi. I got a licensed driver that became an employee. I then got an old Greyhound. We built beds in there so we could sleep 11 roadies. Saved a lot of money. But I made sure we made the time, and we did. We never missed a stage call or a concert. One of the groups that we did, the very first concert of their career, and this was the first tour. They were just going out. Their manager called me. You're the guy that's got that big PA. I need it because I got this band and they're really loud. Does anybody know who that is? No one ever guesses it because it's ZZ Top without beards. I told you it was their first show. Oh yeah, they finally got there and they're still friends and I still help them with their audio and their microphones and stuff. But I got another call. I mean, the phone was just going nuts. I'm just picking a couple of them that had a little significant. This guy said, "Okay, you the guy with the PA, right?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Okay, got to have you in Boston tomorrow." I said, "Not possible." "What are you talking about? Not possible?" I said, "Well, we're out with Chaka Khan. The guys are in Chicago, and we have a contract with her, and we there's no way we could be there overnight." "Well, why not?" I said, "Well, we can't drive there. We have a semi." "You got a semi?" "Well, see, hell, hello. Well, find somebody to take that job." And I said, "Now just wait a minute. Who are you? You coming in here making all kind? Who are you?" He said, "We're the Who." I said, "No, who are you?" He said, "We are the Who." I'm going, "Oh my gosh, okay." I'd barely heard of them, really. It was Pete Rudge, the manager. He said, "You got to be here. We came to America last week with a new set of music. It was a new sound, and we came here with our own little columns. They only had four of them. It was called Watkins Electric Music Columns to fill 10,000 seats. Come on." The first show, the media absolutely wrecked them. I mean, it was the end of their career. And the second show was going to be in Boston, and Daltrey, he said, I'm not going to do this. I can't hear. I'm not singing. It's bad. I'm going back to London. You figure it out." Well, about that time, Red said, just hang on. Let us do a sound check. And so we made it. How did we get there? They hired the Tiger Air Freight, and we drove our semi and a bus in there, and we went to Boston, and we made it. And of course, really kind of saved their whole career, because who knows where it would have been from there. And we were with them for 6 years. I became really good friends with Pete Townsend. After that was over, a couple of years, he called me one day and he said, "We have a couple of years off. Come here. I want to talk to you. Come to London." So I jumped on a TWA and from St. Louis to London and got out of the cab, and there it was, his home on the Thames. Upstairs was this studio, very famous studio, because Pete wrote all of his music there. And if I had a lot more time, I'd tell you a lot of history about that room. But one thing about it, he's standing on a chair, a little red chair up in the left corner, and there's in front of it is a little Lowry home organ, a little $900 home organ. Why is that there? Because what he did for it was quite amazing. I'm sure you recognize this. That was done on that little home organ. In the right picture, you can see it with a Cynthia on top. And he coupled them together, and bingo, tracked in some piano. Well, I got to tell you, I was really thrilled because I just learned so much from him. Even that day, there was so much going on. But he said, "Look, quad sound is big right now. Do you think you could help us build a system that we can move Roger's voice around the hall?" And I said, "Yeah, I think we could do that." He said, "Well, you go finish doing that. I'll go finish writing it. We're going to do Quadrophenia." Well, uh, that didn't put any pressure on me. But it so happened, just again, one of these things. I hooked up with a company, IES, in London about a year or two before that, and we had like systems then. We had all the big cabinets and stuff that I had in America. We built the same thing for him in London. So if I had a tour going to London, I didn't have to take the big stuff. He didn't have to come over here. He at the time was doing a lot of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, so we could play on each other. But we had started building the only serious rock and roll console. And it was really something, called the Mavis, named for David Hartstone's wife. And we just happened to be able to have enough time to add 2 more outputs to it to make it a quad mixer. And we did have the quad mixer for Quadrophenia. And these were happy days for Peter and I. Well, I'm sure you've heard stories. I wish we had about 3 hours. I could tell you Keith Moon stories all night long, because I stood behind Townsend's amplifiers and to about 6 or 8 feet from Keith. He was absolutely the best drummer I have ever been around, and I've been around a lot of them. He was amazing, but he was also crazy. I mean, insane. He was truly insane. And we never knew what he was going to do. The opening night, the opening night of Quadrophenia in the Cow Palace in San Francisco, this is what happened again, a piece of rock and roll history. He passed out, fell over the drums, so I had to rush over and help him. It's like, what in the world were you thinking? And so we had to figure out just what in the world was this idiot doing. He was out cold. We carried a doctor on the tours with us, especially that band. And within about another hour and a half or two, the doctor had given him some kind of antidote and he came back. But during that period, another piece of history, Townsend kind of kidded about it. Seems our drummer took a vacation. We don't have any drummers here, do you? Some guy, I don't know how he got there. We don't know. All these stages are about 10 foot high. This kid comes rolling up across the top. They must have thrown him up there. And he jumped on Keith's drums, and I swear he did every lick. We were all looking around while they were playing, going, "Where'd this guy come from?" And it was amazing. And after the show, he jumped back in the audience, and he could have been a big star if he'd have hung around. But these are really great stories. I did just a couple, but I got a gold record that they gave me. I was so blessed and honored. That is the one side of that PA that we built for them. But here's where ham radio came into it. It really was in most of the things I did, but I built monitors for them. Monitors were not seen. And I had been playing with these with the Dead. They really freaked out over this, but I never had this much because the Dead wasn't near this loud. John Entwistle, the bass player, is standing about 6 feet from right at 1,000 watts of speakers and amps. And it didn't feed back. Why? Because of ham radio. Pete Townsend was standing a few feet from a 250-watt horn. And I had another one. You can just see it over the top of Keith's cymbals. Why? Because of phasing that I learned from antenna. I'm going to really get into this in a couple of minutes, believe me. Ham radio played such a big part in my life. Well, I get another phone call from Paul Klipsch. Paul is the father of the folded horn. He was the father of the hi-fi movement. He called me, wanted to know if he could come and visit me. Yes, thank you. I was like freaked out. He flew up to Marissa and he was with me all day. And I figured he was going to cut me off at the knees, but he didn't. Why did you do that? Well, how come you did this? How come? He had never seen anything like this. He was an efficiency nut. And I was quite the reverse. And he was just mesmerized by all this stuff. So he put me in his plane that night. We flew back to Hope, Arkansas. And the next day, little Bobby Heil was just unbelievable nuts. He taught me so much in just that day, pointing me to things. We became very good friends. I would call him a lot, and he was my college professor, really. But the deal was that he was talking to me about learning about the Bell Labs. He said, "You need to find out about the Bell Labs studies." Well, it was a little more difficult in those days. You had to go to the library. Today, it's easy. You go to Google. The Bell Labs in the 20s, they were referred to as the idea factory. Bell Labs was a consolidation of AT&T and Western Electric, which is the manufacturing arm of the Bell system. They had 4,000 scientists and engineers assigned to this newly created Bell Telephone Lab. They were fully dedicated to one subject: how the human ears worked and what frequencies were going to be most important to understand that spoken word. Why? Because they put the telephone system together. 2 wires from New Jersey all across America to the West Coast. Here's the kicker. Every 50 miles across this country, they would have relay stations to keep the voltage up, to keep the level up and non-distorted. And when they got together and turned on the first telephone system, this is what they heard. Something similar. Something like this. Whoa, what happened? The F and the S, a P and a B, couldn't understand the articulation. Why? Everything was equal and flat all across the country. What is the problem? They couldn't figure it out. So they put those 4,000 scientists to work. And yes, there were 4,000 of them. This is not a made up picture. This was an actual picture of one of the hallways. Dr. Fletcher and Dr. Munson were the leaders.
Interrupt you for a minute. We got 2 telephone guys on here. We got Barry and Larry. They're both old telephone guys. So it's kind of cool that you're bringing this up with them, okay?
Yeah. Well, we may want to talk to them here in just a minute. They probably know. Oh, I'm sure they know all of this because this is so important for ham radio. It's important for everything because our ears are not flat. Look at that graph. You see why kids like to listen to music loud up at 100, 110 dB? It's almost flat. You listen down here 20, 30 dB where we normally hear things right now. My God, we got big holes. Well, those 2,000 engineers and scientists found out this. The telephone system is from 300 to 3K pretty much. And they discovered that the human ear had to have that 2.5K a little elevated from everything else. Why? It's the way the human hearing system works. I have a really great demo. Right now, I have a parametric EQ. Everything is flat, but I have elevated to 2.5 a little bit, but I'm going to take out 2.5. Now, what's interesting about this, when you listen, remember what I said, listening is a mental process. Think about this real hard. Listen. When I take out just one thing, 2.5, you're going to say, well, he turned the bass up. No, I didn't. Audio is like a teeter-totter. it all refers to everything else. And when I take out the 2.5, the low end's going to come up. And here we go. 2.5 is gone. And it sounds like I put more bass in it. Well, yeah, because that's all that was left. But the F and an S, a P and a B, they're gone. So I'm only going to turn back up 2.5. There it is at about 1,000. Here we're coming to 2. And it's kind of interesting. In a minute, there's 2K. But when I hit 2.5, it's like it lights up. It's just magic. The F and the S, the P and a B, they're so easy to understand. So articulation is golden. The genius scientists figured it out. They equalized the telephone system and bingo, they were off and running. And so it it described the whole thing. You can't have flat audio. And everything below 100 cycles is useless when you're talking about speech. All it does is suck up RF energy in the ham radio. And maximum speech articulation occurs between 2 and 3K. I just proved that to you. Well, that's where you want the RF to be. Dr. Fletcher and Dr. Munst, they were the guys that discovered it. Well, I was off the air for a number of years, and I came back on the air, and I couldn't understand what the hell was happening. I came back. What happened to my great Art Collins audio? Whoa! And these guys would answer me and say, "Well, I got my Kenwood, my matching microphone." The only matching is the color. I learned later on when I started working for ICOM Kenwood Yaesu, which I still do. They don't build their microphones. They have an OEM company build it, paint it the same color. Well, what are we going to do about this? So what I did is I took an equalizer out of one of the mixers that we built, 2-band shelving, nothing wild, but it was bass and treble. Now, I was the engineer. How did I find out what frequencies? Because of the Bell Labs studies and what we needed for our 3K of ham radio. Very interesting, a ham radio is about the same bandwidth as a telephone. So 160 hertz on the low end, 2.5 on the high. You're the only control you have is to be able to increase or decrease that frequency. And it was really all you needed. Well, I wrote an article and I sent it to the league and they published it. And oh my goodness, I didn't expect this. It was a do-it-yourself article, but a lot of guys didn't want to build it, so they started calling me. And I had to reopen Heil Sound because we had closed it 2 years earlier. I got totally out of the rock business and things started happening. And I was so happy because it really helped a lot of the communications. Well, one of the things that's so important about equalization, and I still hear once in a while saying, I don't need that darn EQ. Oh, yes, you do. I don't need it. Bill said I sound fine. I don't need it. Well, you do need it. You're just hard-headed and stubborn because you don't have to listen to yourself. But maybe this will wake you up. Here is a great demonstration you'll never forget. This little balloon is full of RF. Now, one of the main functions of a transmitter and the selection of what you do to it is to set the bandwidth. And many times the guys don't do that. Well, you need to, because if you band stop it at like 100, 150 on the low end and 3K on the top, what's that going to do? Now we really messed up the deal by elevating 2.5. Well, that RF has to go somewhere because you've band stopped it. Where is that RF going to go? It's going to go to 2.5K. You really told the RF where to go, because the equalization, it has to show up somewhere, and it will show up wherever it can. And you've told it 2.5K. And that is why the contesters, the de-expeditions, people that want to really be on top of the pileup, use one of my elements that sound terrible, but it has all of their power right here. If you want to be wider, that's fine, but you're just not going to be on top of the pileup. So you have to play with audio to learn that. And it's something that in 1999, I get a letter from Dr. Inouye Communications, ICOM, had a picture of his station, and it had one of these, and it had one of my gold lines. I'm going, what? I couldn't believe it. This is the man that formed and owns ICOM. Building new radio, would like to use your idea. And he didn't need me, but it was just, he just wanted to check to make sure he had the frequencies right and so on. From the Pro 1 all the way through the line to the 7300, the 7610. And if you haven't seen this, I just received this from them. They want me to build a headset. That's what I do these days. I build things for them that they want, because they finally figured out, don't go to China and have somebody screw with it. This is their 7300. If you don't have one, get it. Oh my gosh, this is a 7300 and a little 3-pound box, battery operated. It's got everything and all the graphics and things. It's a 7300. Yeah, it only runs 5 watts, but hey, put it in an amplifier, and oh boy. But I get so thrilled about working with these guys. After we got the Pro 1 going, why, Dr. Hasegawa came to me at Dayton and said, we want to do it better. I said, well, we'll do a parametric. Yeah, that'd be good. I said, wait a minute. You're going to have a problem. What be the problem? Education. Why? I said, well, with a regular shelving, you just have 2 knobs to control. No problem. You can't monkey with it. That's all you need. And it works great. Yeah, do it better. Okay. But I said, think about it. You're not going to have 2 knobs. You're going to have 9. 9. Oh, I told you. Well, it happened. And to me, one of the best transceivers ever built was a Yaesu 9000. First of all, they listened to me. The only one that did. It has that connector on the front panel. It doesn't have that stupid CB8 pin. It has a professional XLR. Every audio thing in the world should have an XLR because it's balanced. We're going to get into that in a minute. And it had one other thing that I got my way. It doesn't have an ALC meter. What? Are you crazy? It has a meter, but it's marked mic gain. That's exactly how you set mic gain. You don't call Bill or Joe or Roger in the morning and say, hey, is my mic set all right? You're the engineer. Before you ever key that transmitter, you want to make sure it's okay. and you do it by watching the ALC meter. You can probably see that meter behind my shoulder. That's a Mike Duro loudness meter. It's a very cool thing. It's calibrated. Practically every radio station in the world have them. And I use it to check gain and things on the products I build. But you will never see it in the red. I mean, way over in the red. It just flashes very little. And that's what you want to do. That's how you set mic gain. But we're going to get in that minute. So all of this stuff that I learned about the Bell Lab guys, it was just absolutely so important. I never realized what was going to happen to my life after all of that. I started working with these companies and so on, but my whole deal was that we were building a lot of sound systems and stuff. We had 35 people working in the plant in Marissa. My brother-in-law ran the wood shop. We had our own fiberglass shop because we built the fiberglass. That was another thing that Clips was very impressed with. And he helped me make sure those curves were right when we did our molding. And we built a lot of amplifiers. The amplifiers were very cool. They were modular. If you were on a gig and the left side blew out, well, when you bought the amp, you got a toolkit that had a spare module, and you take a little break for about 5 minutes, just snap out that module, plug in a new one, you're back on the air. And we had built a lot of talk boxes. We're going to get in that in a minute, but building a lot of systems, big stuff. Electro Voice came out with their Petition, which was a great hi-fi speaker, and I bought one of the 30-inch woofers and built a guitar bass amp with it, and it became a really good thing because it was a huge billboard. I had people from Jimi Hendrix to Vanilla Fudge, you name it, would release it for their tours, and of course it had Ye-O music on it. So, and that's Jeff Beck's system there in the middle. Jeff, he was getting ready to go out with a vocalist. He had never done vocalist before. You know, you'll notice it's a very small system because he was playing small halls, little theaters, so it was easy to carry around. But all during this time, and it was kind of getting to the end of what we did there in that market, I was called to do a lot of festivals because we had huge PA. We'd put them all together. I had a very cool thing I did with 2 stages, a left and a right, with the 3 different sound systems in between. Of course, all the sound systems work all the time, but that allows us to have one performing while we're setting up the next one and so on. And it was quite something, I have to tell you. I saw a lot of this. Oh my, oh my. Well, I actually wrote the book. I had so many guys come to me. Well, how did you learn all this stuff? Well, ham radio. What are you talking about, ham radio? Well, I learned a lot. And the manuals were to be read by engineers, not just kids getting into this business. So it became the Bible for a lot of these guys, called the Practical Guide. And I also have written one for ham radio. It's the same way. Most of the ham radio handbooks, you got to be an engineer to read them or understand them. So I just like I'm doing here with all the clubs, there is so much information that we need to pass on. And I don't feel that it's happening. And hopefully they sure are. My emails and phone calls project all of that. Well, we were doing kind of bouncing around a little bit. We were doing in '69. We were doing a little tour with a band called the James Gang, and that was Joe Walsh. And we really became friends because 2 dates into that first tour, we found out we were hams. WB6ACU. We have been friends for a long time. And he said, I'm doing a new band, and called Barnstorm. I need you to help me put it together, all the equipment, which we did, and Marissa. But he said, I was in Nashville and recorded some of the tracks. And while I was there, the steel guitar player, Pete Drake, owned a studio. And Pete had this little box and it had a little 3-inch speaker and a little hose on it. Bill and Dottie West were good friends of Joe. They were the ones that took him to Pete's studio. And Joe saw that, so he kind of rewrote the song. And of course, everybody recognizes Rocky Mountain Way. But how are we going to do that live? So 2 hams go out to Heil Sound, and we came up with a 250 watt JBL driver. I had my fiberglass guys build me that little box for it. What you see on the right is the production. It's current production these days. It's still there, but it's in the steel box and 100 watts. That's all we needed. But Joe and I built that, and it was really something, of course. And it was just something that I never realized what was going to take off from that. I had been doing most of Humble Pie's shows when they came to America first. And one of their guitar players was a 17-year-old Peter Frampton. Well, shortly after Humble was making it pretty good here, his manager was Dee Anthony. And Dee called me one day and he said, hey, I'm pulling out Pretty Boy. I said, wait a minute. What are we talking about? Oh, he says, I'm pulling out Frampton. Going to make a solo act. He's cute. The girls are going to love him. He's going to be a big star. You're going to make him sound good. And he hung up the phone. Okay. So we did. We built a PA that we went on tour with his first band, Frampton's Camel. Peter wasn't happy with that band at all and pulled it from the market very quickly. So he took a year off and started regrouping. In the meantime, he had a little girlfriend her name was Penny McCall. He wrote a song, Penny for Your Thoughts, if you're any fans of Frampton Real Deep. Penny was married in my home in Marissa. And a lot of that went on in those days. The guys had come over from the UK or wherever, and they'd find a little gal and they get married, they could stay here longer. She called me one day afterwards. She said, hey, I need a Christmas present for Peter. Do not send me a guitar. He's got a lot of them. So what did I do? I sent her a talk box. Whoa. And you can write this history. Peter's the only one that can make it talk. I mean, really talk. And we've been such good friends over the years. And he told me, he said, it took me a year to do that. I just took off a year. When Dee told me that this first band of mine want to go make it, well, I said, okay. And he said, I had to learn the English language through your talk box. But I'm very honored to know and liked by him. Every one of his interviews, if you've ever heard him, he talks about the Heil Sound talk box and our relationship. So very fortunate. Ham radio also played a part in this guy. John Bon Jovi owned the power station in New York. It was the prestigious recording studio. It really was the old power station. He was a ham. I used to talk to him on 40 meters late night. One night he said, hey, I got to talk to you. Send me your phone number. Give me your phone number. And I did. Next day he calls. He said, look, I got this nephew. He's just working here in the studio, and I can get him all the contracts, and he can play really well. He's really cute. He said, we can make a star out of him, but he's got to have a hook. Send me one of those boxes. So I did. And of course, you recognize this. Living on a Prayer. All of the crazy things. It gets on with Slash and all kinds of people. But I actually got tired of all of that. I was 12 years in that business, and punk rock came in. And that really sealed it for me, because they were not very respectful of anybody. And the concert that shut the door was Wendy O. Williams. Anybody remember Wendy O. Williams? Wendy was a porn queen turned rock singer. Plasmatics. And all during the tour, I took on that one tour. It was the first and only last of any kind of punk rock. And my guys would call me, you got to come and see this. I said, Randy, I'll be there on the last night. That's when I get paid. I'll be there. No, you're going to love this. Randy, I'll be there the last night. So I get out of the cab, ironically, in Cleveland, Ohio. And I walked in the stage door, and what did I see? Here comes Randy following this thing. She had orange hair. She had on a maiden form and a pair of little panties walking, and I'm going, what is this? And he's just smiling. I told you you're going to love that. I said, well, are you going to, she getting dressed with? No, man, we're going to doing a sound check. I said, wait a minute, is this how I told you you're going to love it. I said, I'm not going to love this. I know I'm not. About the third song, the maiden form was in the fourth row. So I said, what am I doing? So I had two very young daughters at home. It's all I could think about. And the encore was to drive a car on the stage, stick a dynamite in it and blow it up. Again, a higher power than me. It burned up one of my speakers, and I'm going, goodbye. And that was our last concert. That was my last of all of that. Because at that time, music had really degraded. Degrade's the wrong word. It gotten, guys were on tour. Music was kind of soft, and I wasn't getting a lot of contracts. There was a lot of that kind of stuff. I said, forget it. So I closed the book, sold my systems. The next week, I always had people, hey, you want to get out of this? I'll fine. So I sold it all. Goodbye. Well, I got into the satellite business in the late 70s because one night in 78, I'm watching Tom Schneider. Remember Tom Schneider? Sit around smoking a cigarette at night, talking about things. And I turned it on, and he's talking to W5KHT. Wait a minute. What are you doing here? And they had a satellite dish sitting beside him. Well, W5KHT was the guy I was doing moon bounce with that big array back in 62. He was in Oklahoma City, Bob Cooper. Bob Cooper was the father of all home satellite television. He would hold classes once a month in his backyard and teach us hams, a lot of TV dealers, how to take a Folgers coffee can and build an LNA in it, go out and get a surplus dish, and you could pick up HBO. Well, they weren't even on the air yet for anybody other than the things they would send to some of the cities. But anyway, I got involved in that big time. I put in thousands of them in the late 70s and beginning of the 80s. Well, I'm thinking I'm putting in a lot of nice systems in people's home, but little 3 or 4 inch speakers and a television. Come on, man, we had digital audio. This is cool. Why not? So I started building home theaters, and I would take them to the CES show, set them up. And while I was at one of the shows, the Hubbard family talked to me about being on a team for them. What are we doing here? He said, well, we just paid a huge amount of money, like 60 mil, to buy our own satellite on K-band. It was the first K-band satellite, and they bought it. And the reason they did that is they could pick the arc, which it was dead center, so they could cover east and west coast with one bird. Okay. So we want you to be on our test team. Okay. What's this going to entail? We're going to send you a dish. You put it up. This is in 1991. And I had this in my backyard in Marissa. And they'd shoot signals to us, and then we'd call them and tell them what was happening. Well, that went on until 1994, and it was here. Well, at that time, for 25 years, I was on KMOX radio at a show we called High Tech Heil. Jim White and I, we were two hams. We were just going crazy. We had the largest radio audience at that time. We were pulling 33 points. Today, that station's pulling 8. I mean, it was an amazing time because we were talking about all this technology. And I was on television in St. Louis. And in 1994 at the CES show, I went on national ABC to let people know it's here, DirecTV. And we were the first dealer to ever sell one. We put it in the first home. And oh man, things went crazy from there. I was building home theaters like nuts, putting in thousands of dishes, but we weren't just little 4 speakers in the rear. We were building motorized curtains and real seats. That room was 200,000. I mean, these were serious people that had a lot of money, and we were the guys that do it. Then I got into some of the design. I had a lady come to me one time. We got this old house and this is in the basement. Can you do something? I said, yeah. No, it's not in my vocabulary. There's what I did to it. Back behind that curtain you see pulled, that's what was there. It was crazy. But I come back to ham radio. I said, this is enough of this craziness. And again, I came back and I was not very happy. I was not very happy because I told you my Art Collins audio went berserk. But then with the EQ, things really did start moving, you know. But the problem was that a lot of people didn't know how to use a microphone. What are you talking about, Heil? They didn't use them. They didn't know. What are you talking about? I'm talking about stuff like this. They're 6 feet from a microphone. They lost their transient response. They lost all of their articulation. You have to speak into a microphone, no more than 2 inches. And it's important because when you double the distance, you'll lose 6 dB. Think about that. Doubling your power gets you 3 dB. You want to think about that too. You're running 500 watts. You're not making it because you got some mushy microphone, no articulation, no EQ. So you're going to buy a kilowatt. Yeah. You took $2,000 of your wife's money. She didn't know this yet. And you bought a kilowatt amplifier and you bought 3 dB. Do you know the human ear cannot detect a 3 dB rise? Our guys that are here from the Bell Labs, they will tell you that. I'm not making this up. Now, let me tell you what you can do. I'm just telling you. You can believe it because it's true, or say, oh, Heil, he's full of crap. Okay, I only deal what the scientists tell me. So you went from 500 watts to 1,000 and you gained 3 dB. Let me tell you what to do with that couple of $1,000. You give that to your wife so she can buy shoes and purses. That will get you more than that little amplifier. Trust me. And put a little equalization in it. You can get sometimes up to 10 or 12 dB just by equalizing, using your microphone right. Because you're going to lose 6 dB if you're not speaking into it. That's exactly why I brought booms to this market in 1980. When I first got into it, I said, man, we got to do something about this. And so we did. And it has become really something for me. Not only ham radio, but we have in our plant, we have a custom shop. We can do all these wonderful microphones. Put your name on them, your call. This is all good stuff. We worked with Charlie Daniels for about 12, 13 years. What a wonderful American. I love Charlie. He had 30 Heil microphones on his stage. He wouldn't let anything else there. So my custom guys built him a microphone for him, a true American. I said, hey, build me one of these too. That's the kind of work they do. Charlie was something. I miss him. But we do all these things. And the artists, they discovered about this large diaphragm that we were doing. And you notice Carrie in the center picture. We usually would paint her microphones the same colors, her dresses and stuff. There she was in the back of a pickup truck that was blue, stuff like that. But all these guys, Keith Urban, Slash, Paul Rogers, Stevie. I mean, these are all people that would come to me, and their agents would come to me. The picture with Keith's kind of fun. we met him in a rehearsal hall in LA one day, and the mixer's right behind Sarah there. And he's over in the middle of the hall talking to me. We're discussing what we're going to build for him. He looked around, hey, just a minute. And he runs over. They said, that's your wife? Yeah, just a minute. And he runs over and gives her a big hug. And of course, my answer to him was, you still love redheads, right? Because he married one, if you know the story. Anyway, and we did all kinds of stuff. Helped Tim Allen get his ham radio license. And if you ever watched the show, I had Sarah sitting in front of a bunch of QSL cards and so on. Sirius Radio just dumped a lot of their Electro voices and bought 250 PR40s. And it just really continued like, whoa, where do we go from here? Why did Sirius and so many broadcasters, why did they drop their Electro voices? Well, I have a really great demonstration for you. Here, let's do this one. I'll unplug this. This is our PR30. I really should get a 40 for you too. We were the first guys to come up with large diaphragms. Later, Shure had tried it, them. And so in 2000,
We lost your sound, Bob. We have no audio.
there. Joe took me down to we were sitting at his kitchen table. He set me down one day and he said, you gotta listen to me. I said, why? I want you to build me a microphone. I said, well, aren't you using the ball thing? Yeah, but he says, I got to just stick it right here. I want something I can move around. And all of this stuff that's behind me, the noise, I want to get rid of it. Remember that big antenna you had? When I come through there in the bus and you turn that around, I couldn't hear you. Do that to my microphone. So it got me thinking, and away we went. I came up with a large diaphragm. It's 1.5 inches. All the other companies are 3/4 of an inch, maybe an inch. But I figured it out. A ham radio operator figured it out. Barely made it out of the high school. Barely. Well, it was all about phasing and making things happen. Here's how I did it. Every microphone out there other than ours has 4 little holes, 3, 6, 9, 12. Little 1/8 inch hole. That's the only entrance for all of the unwanted stuff, because when that comes in, it's under the diaphragm, it's out of phase. Well, that's not enough, obviously, because they're all other microphones, they don't have good rear rejection. So here's what I did. I put that big diaphragm up on top of a collection tube, I call it. And now all of the lows, the mids, the highs, they come screaming in the side panels up that tube into the bottom one of the element. And that element is 360 degrees open. So we have a ton of rear that we can have out of phase. And so check this out. When I turn this microphone backwards, it'll be 40 dB down. Here we go. And it's down 40 dB. Oh, I'm still talking. It still works, but it's down 40 dB. Well, this has attracted a lot of people, and I'm very blessed by that. With the Sirius and all these wonderful stations, plus the recording studios are using them. That's Martina McBride's studio. And it's also on stages. It's a great bass drum microphone. It's the only dynamic that'll get down to 28 cycles out to 18K. But it's got a rise. Where is the rise? 2.5K. Remember? Automatic. So when these guys say, what damn thing not flat? I don't want it to be flat. You don't have to equalize it. And that was my game. I wanted it to be something that we could really make happen. And we continued on. We built a copy of the RCA 77, got this element in it. And there again, many broadcasters. But my wife owns a company, and she said, hey, you got to do something that doesn't cost a lot, but really sounds good. So we built this, the HM12. I had built this as an interview microphone for Fox News in Chicago some years back. So we had all the R&D worked on the element, and the element is really something. It's a wonderful sounding element, and it's an open frame. It's not like every other. And we already had the big money done. Big money's on R&D. And this thing is wonderful. It's under $100. And so these things just keep going. And I built the 781. This has become the podcaster's dream, and many ham radio operators. I rolled off the last 1.5 octaves. It starts around 100, a little bit above. It has everything else going for it, like the 40. But the 781 is it's really a nice microphone, and it's just barely over $100. But you know, it's things that I listened to people back in 1980, what was it, 85. I had a call from the Southern California DX Club, and they said, hey, Heil, we've been using your element, and we want to put it together on a headset. Right now we're duct taping them, the old headset. We want you to build us a true DX headset. They were going to go to Clipperton, and they invited me to come to San Diego and watch them take off. The BM-10 was born. And this is one amazing headset. It's very light, and it's got our special element in it. And we took it off the market here about, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago. I thought somebody's going to come burn my building down because, these things, they are predominant with the DXers. And so I thought, oh, I guess we better put this back on the market. We did. And it was just so much fun to work with all these people, but we're still doing it because now I came up with other wonderful products, the BM-17 for the backpackers, great stuff, and so we do things because you ask me. And one of the things I want you to hear is what the Bell telephone guys did to me. Let me unplug. Okay, because I need something. I got to turn the gain up. I was very, very honored when all of these DXpeditions would come to us. And I had developed an element that needed absolutely no EQ. It was the worst sounding element that anyone could ever create. Well, why did I want to do that? Because it had a 10 dB spike at 2.5. I said 10 and rolled it off at 500. So there was nothing there. All of your power was around 2 to 2.5. And they loved it because they were on top of the pile up. I'll let you hear it. It's a ruckus sounding thing, but think about why I built it. It's worth more, and more of the DX stations than anybody. It really, really works great. Oh, cut it out. It really works great because it has no lows. It has all highs. Come on, my monitor coming back. It has all highs, and it is a wonderful sounding thing for DX. You're not gonna do regular stuff with this. But it sure cuts the pileups. And if you don't believe me, why, you go look at some of the guys that's worked 360. Ask them what kind of microphone they got. So we're just doing things that I think everybody needs to have. And one of the things that I want to do before we get out of here, all of these things work because of phasing. It's one of my favorite subjects. I have a great demonstration you will never forget. You will never, ever forget this demo. What I have here is two microphones. I'm going to unplug this one. And I'm going to plug these into this. Oh, let me get this set back up. Here we go. Into a Y cord. So I can have two microphones simultaneously. They're both PR22s, the microphone I was commissioned by. There we go. I was commissioned to build so they didn't have to put any EQ out there because they didn't trust their sound man. But it's a very articulate sounding microphone. Okay, I have two of them. If I bring them together, it's going to raise 3 dB. I double my power. My meter's going to go up 3 dB. Are you ready? Here it goes. It's going to be $2,000, right? Here it goes. Here comes two of them. I just doubled my output by 3 dB. I'm going to do that again. There it is. Now what are you going to do? That's just a little thought. That's really not why I'm here for this one. I have this magic little plug. Pin 2 is to 3, 3 is to 2. I'm going to unplug here and we're going to plug this guy back in. Now we have two microphones and they're identical. They sound the same. The only thing is, this guy, when I speak into it, the diaphragm goes down. When I speak into this guy, the diaphragm goes up because it's out of phase. What happens? What happens when I talk into both of them? Huh? You ready? Pay attention and listen. Nothing. They cancel. Both of them together. Goodbye. Whoa. How many hours do we have? Because it's my favorite subject. And we could come up with all kinds of things for you. How does phasing work? You have a Yagi antenna? How's it work? What do you mean, how's it work? Dr. Yagi, he never had any computers. He never had any modeling crap. He had a brain and a calculator, probably didn't even have that. And he figured it out that if he could make a director a little shorter and so far up on the boom from the driven element, he could get gain. If he went behind a little longer so far, he could get rejection because it was out of phase. Whoa. I always wanted a phase array. I figured, oh, I don't have enough money for that. Wow. Well, about 10 years ago, Sarah and I bought some property down in the Ozarks, 5.5 acres. I'm going, yeah. And I put up a phased array. And I have some incredible video you want to watch and listen. We have just completed the installation of a 75-meter phased array antenna system consisting of a pair of coaxial dipoles mounted atop a pair of 55-foot telephone poles. We put them in an inverted V fashion, and the poles are 64 foot apart. These are 500 foot from the operating position, fed with RG213. In order to make the antennas directly from east to west, we use a delay line of 43 foot here on 75 meters. It's switched in and out of the driven element, either east or west. The downlead length is 126 foot. We take all of that coax, the downlead length, the 43-foot phasing delay line, and mounted them in a container, one of the plastic container boxes that we actually buried. And just the top of it shows. It's all sealed, so it's waterproof. But that's the way we get to switch all the components from 500 foot using one of the Amatron RCS 8V remote switches. It really works well. Take a listen to how we can get at least 10 to 20 dB difference east to west.
Like a lot of people do. Mine's usually 3 inches or so. That's just after I get done mowing it. And I know, probably, we get a dry day. I'm going to have to lay out there and mow. That's just all there is to it because, if you leave it that high, when it starts growing in it all, it gets looking ragged pretty quick. So it's to that point now, and
the system really performs on weak signals. Take a listen as we switch to the direction they're coming from. Also note the preamplifier makes no difference on 75 meters on this signal. The preamp will, of course, make the meter read higher, but in many cases, the preamplifier does not cause the weak signal to be more readable. Check it out.
Hey, Sue. Yeah, well, I see they introduced a display on it, and I don't know if that is their form of portable, or what that is. Your wire
of that hooked up to your computer, and then did you use your handheld to go through it?
Usually don't have to say anymore. It's great proof. And it cost me all of about $20 for that coil of RG8 phasing line. I went to the co-op electric company and they gave me these cut-off poles. Had a friend that had a drill, and next thing you know, we were on the air. Just a couple of dipoles. The relay was simple. My problem with the relay is I hate rotary switches. I hate them with the passion. So what I did is I went to Antique Electronic Supply and bought a bunch of Les Paul guitar switches. And I could switch east to west for 40, east to west for 75. And I also then switched them for my different radios. And it really worked well. And you can see those behind me here. But it's just things that I think everybody needs to really play with because it does work. It's all about the science. And I look back upon my whole life and it's like, wow. And I guess one of the main things that happened was when Dr. Inouye got me to help him with his equalization. And now I have done all the EQ, even out to the 7300. The problem is a lot of guys, they're afraid. I get on the air and I'll hear guys and I ask them, how's your EQ set? Oh my God, I can't touch that. Oh, I can't touch that. What do you mean you can't touch? Oh, no. I'm in the default. And Bill said, I'll say I'm fine. Yeah, right. It's very simple. Very simple. Here's a 7300, which all of the ICOMs, when we did them, they're all like this. They might have some different look, but for normal rag chew, the first thing you have to set is the bandwidth 100 to 2900 for rag chew, and you want to roll off a little of the bass, punch that treble up about 3, and you listen to your monitor. Really, I think it's better to listen in a separate receiver with a headphone. But then for the old DX, yeah, you just restrict the heck out of it. You want to set it narrow at 500 to 2500. The treble, all you can get at +5 and no bass -5. Oh, buddy, we are in heaven. And all of them are like this. The 7300, the 7610, they just have a little bit different look on their front panels. And we were commissioned by ICOM to build a microphone because they have very low gain preamps. I was able to get them raise that in the 735 came along. I was able right after then's when I got to working with them, and they raised that gain in all these new ones now. But then comes the parametric. What do you do about this, Heil? Well, it's pretty simple. No, it's not. There's 9 controls. What's the first one you're going to set? Bandwidth. So you go in, find the bandwidth, narrow it up. You can do that real easy. But now you have 9 controls. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Simple. There are 3 filters, 3 parametric. That means you can change the parameters. You're the engineer of all of it. Okay, let's look at that first one. It's going to be frequency, bandwidth, and plus or minus. We're going to set that first one at 200 hertz on the low end. Going to set it for 2 octaves. What's that mean? That means that 200, it could reach out to 200, 400, 600 if you let it go. We're going to set it for 2 octaves. It's all, just don't question it. Set it for 2 octaves. What's the third button? Plus or minus. What are you going to do with that 200 cycles? Bingo. Notch it. Okay. Hey, good. You're third the way home. What's the second filter? Frequency, level, and width. There's where people get in trouble. They don't know where to put it. There's something about audio between 900 and 1200 hertz, there's a boxy sound. It's a boxy. You can do this to your head and you'll see what I'm talking about. You'll hear what I'm talking about. It's a boxy sound. You want to get rid of that. Okay, so we set that second filter at 1,000 cycles or so, just to start. Bandwidth of 2, and you're going to notch it 4 or 5 dB. Hey, we're almost finished. You're way ahead of me. You know what we're going to do with the third one. Frequency is going to be 2.5. It's going to be for the bandwidth 2, and it's going to be plus. Now you have to listen in some headphones and another receiver, or you can do it with the monitor. Most monitors aren't really precise, but if you don't have another receiver, that'll work, and level it all out. But how easy was that? I mean, it is simple. Frequency level width, frequency level width, frequency level width. Now, here's the only deal. This picture didn't come out well, and I copied it off of a screen of one of the transmitters. That column on the left, that's a number system: 101, 102, 103, 104, 1 through 100. That labels each one of those, and they are different for every Yaesu. You might have some that say 203, 206. Forget it. Forget those numbers. You just take those 9 in a row, frequency level width. But be sure you do the bandwidth first. Now, was that difficult? No, but no one ever helped you. And that's what really kills me. We have an incredible website. In fact, we're doing a new one. It's taken us 2 months to redo it. We're about there, but you go look at our website now, heilsound.com. Under support, you will see about 50 pages, all things ICOM, all things Yaesu, all things Kenwood, all things Elecraft. These are great help to you. And so there is help. And I think maybe I can honestly tell you, you found it. and I'm really happy about that. But there's just so much more to all of the things we do. And RF gain, a lot of guys, they don't pay attention to RF gain. They just leave it wide open. There's a neat little demo on RF gain. Because if you just leave it wide open, it's like this all the time. And if you do it right, it'll sound like a clear channel FM. It's really cool.
And I mostly just am involved in right tuning on the 2-meter net and the 40 and
I'm gonna
80
get
meter
rid of it.
nets. And that's pretty much what I'm limited to. I used to be on packet, but
Background noise is gone
I don't
in
enjoy
between
the
the
computer
syllables.
part of
There it is back up.
get into the running the computers and all like we used to. So I don't really
You
have
never want to have your RF gain wide open. It just doesn't work good. And the same thing with the AGC. This is another interesting piece.
Right now, it's really old technology that just kind of got forgotten, and somebody like Bob or anybody else would, say, I wonder about this old
You back it off.
stuff that we used to do, and then apply it to a new
There's no background noise.
application, and it works great.
I mean, when I'm on the air, I never have my RF gain up, and I'm always in this very, very slow AGC. Otherwise, it bounces too much. So these are all things that they're out there, but I never hear about it. Last but not least, I hate the receivers. I work for these companies, don't forget that. And I hate their audio. Oh, yeah. When I talk to them, it's, well, we got great sensitivity. I'm not talking about selectivity, sensitivity, noise blank. I don't care about that. That's all okay. They're all pretty much the same. I hate to tell you that, but they are. What am I screaming about? Audio out. You have never seen a spec sheet on the audio of your transmitter. I don't care if it's $15,000 or 400. You know what it is? I work for these guys, so I know. It is at least 1, maybe 2 watts at 10% distortion, and that drives me crazy. Listener fatigue is awful, and they won't listen. And then you go out and buy a matching speaker. Well, that's a 50-cent speaker in a $100 box that you pay $300 for. Oh, but it's painted the same color. I forgot to tell you that. Just boils me. And then there's a lot of speakers that are, they're powered speakers, but they're junk. I said, it's time. And I started with the speaker. Paul Clip's written all over it. He taught me years ago how to take a speaker, take it outside into free air, find a cone resonance. Then you build the enclosure to meet that resonance. So there's no distortion. There's no phase distortion, nothing. It works easily. The amplifier is 25 watts. Why do I need that? My gosh. Because I have tons of headroom. So there is no distortion. It's 0.1%. That's hi-fi levels. Wow. What do I drive it with? I drive it with a thing I call the parametric receive audio system. And this is a true piece of wonderment. I have recorded some things off air. So let's go take a listen. And if you haven't had any oohs or ahs yet tonight, you're about to. Let's go take a listen to the PRAS. I'm very, very proud because this has helped a great number of guys that are having a little hearing impairment. This solves it. Let me get this a little bit to the, there we go. What we have is a system that we come out of the product detector. If you can do that, usually can in the back. If not, you can do the headphone amp, but you keep the gain just hardly discernible, very low coming out of that headphone amp. That way it will not distort. It only distorts when it's trying to drive a speaker. So away we go. We have an input level, 3 EQs, 2 shelving, and 1 parametric. The high is set at 6K. You can increase or decrease that. The low is set at 160. You can decrease or increase that one. And you have an output. We also have a record out. That's how I made these recordings. You don't have to have a bunch of Y chords. You come out of here, plug it into your computer, bingo. Beautiful. Works great. Then you have not 1, but 2 headphone amplifiers, very low distortion. And there are 2 of them, 1 for a logger and 1 for the operator. But that's not maybe one of the best pieces of that. You can plug the left side of your headphones here and the right side here, and you can balance should you have a hearing imbalance. I cannot tell you how many cards, letters, and emails I get from guys thanking me that I give them their radio back because of that. But now take a listen to what we can do with low distortion parametric equalization. It is, I call it a miracle box. And you know what? It really is.
At about 30 words a minute, so.
There's a D104. We'll come back to that one.
Sure enough, I can copy it.
This DX station is amazing. He was in Ireland, and I think you'll get
At
the
about
picture.
30 words a minute.
I
So
mean, first of all, I'm going to set this flat the way you hear it. Here it comes. 2.5. Listen to what happens.
India 8 Bravo, Lima Bravo, PI ATLB calling in by
We take him right out of the soup.
4 Sierra, Sierra.
There's the way you hear him.
Hope I have it right. Very good day to you from Ireland. Name is Greene, Lima, India, Alpha Mike, over. Hello, CQ, CQ, CQ20, CQ, CQ20 meters. Echo India 8 Bravo, Lima Bravo, PI ATLB calling in by.
Here are a couple of usual single sideband signals that are mushy and bassy, difficult to understand. You can add some speech articulation just by adding some 2.5 mid-range. Right here.
Of the 2 meter, a sideband, but they're just not, it's not the same as a rig built, just for 2 meter sideband. The receivers will never compare. So it's kind of.
I don't think I have to go any further. There's nothing like it. There's all kinds of filters and speakers and nonsense. This is not nonsense. It's Paul Clips written all over it. I wished he was here to see this, but of course he wasn't here during the design, but I used many of the things that he taught me. And it goes back to all of the things that we talked about today. And I'm very proud of that. And the last thing I'm going to show you is I am totally fed up with connectors. It's just ridiculous. The little bitty things, they came from the CB market in 1964. Little bitty rings. So if you have a recessed, you got to use needle nose. This is a 1/2-inch barrel you can really easily connect. But notice the cable clamp. It actually clamps my cable. There's 2 of them, one for the wire for the microphone and one for the push to talk. And the clamp works. You could pull your car with this. You don't need any of the nonsense that you see with your matching microphone things. And what I'm talking about, you go home and look at your stuff. These matching microphone things, they usually end up having to put heat shrink or black tape around them because the wire isn't made for that clamp. And I don't know why. Why don't they build their own to mate it? I did, and boy, does it work. But then I did my own wire. I hate the wire. All the stuff you have now is 24 gauge, and it's not very good. The shield, if you start picking it out, you're going to end up with about 4 strands. That's enough of that nonsense. This is 18 gauge, a pair of them, because we sell a lot to the broadcasters for balanced line. But that's 100% braid, and it solders like a dream. But notice the blue and the red. They're on the outside of that shield, so that the DC is not inside with the very sensitive AC audio. I have solved so many problems of RFI just by using our cable. The other thing about it, almost all of the transmitters today have balanced line. You know why? Because I had a little hand into that. With Yaesu, we started with the 9000, and it was true balanced input. But with the 5000 on, they went back to unbalanced. But my preamp board is still there, and it's balanced. You just have to know how to wire it, because all of their junk is unbalanced. Microphones that cost $600-700. What are they thinking? So all of this stuff plays, and it plays big time. And I do hope that some of it makes sense to you. I got so much we could talk about, but this is kind of a bit piece of it. it all ended up for me. We're the only manufacturer in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I was very humbled, blessed, and stunned about this because I told the curator when they came to talk about it, I said, there's so much bigger companies. Why me? We're just a little company in Marissa at the time. I said, why? He said, because the things that you did mean something. You really turned the corner for many of the technologies. And we have all kinds of people in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and they're all artists. If it wasn't for you and some of the other guys, they wouldn't be here. You made them sound good. That is the Quadrophenia mixer you see me standing in front of. That is one of the actual rear channels. We had 6 of those in the back of the arena. You look at that other picture, that's a Sun mixer that I hand built. It was a prototype for them. I was the largest Sun amplifier dealer in the country, and they needed a PA. And they said, well, build it for us. So I started working with them, and that's all hand built. That went on that first tour with the Who, and it still works today. At least it did when we put it in that box. And that other one was what we did one of the festivals with, and the serial number one of the talk boxes in there. And last but not least, I was extremely honored a few years back to receive an honorary PhD degree, music and engineering. My goodness, I'm a kid that hardly made it out of high school. But it was all about ham radio, I really tell you, it was. And the pipe organ, it taught me how to listen. So that's what made it happen. And I'm so happy to be here to share some of this with you. I hope it didn't bore you. I hope you learned something. And if you want, we'll come back sometime and pick a subject. That's what's happening now. I've done so many of these, but we're going back, picking a subject and spending time on just that, because you can certainly do that with any subject that we talked about. Anybody have any questions or comments?
That was awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. And I'll be sitting at my 7300 tomorrow trying to figure some things out. Thank you.
It's easy. And if you don't make it, why, send me an email with your telephone number and I'll help you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Where's the AT&T guy?
Larry? Barry? Barry, go ahead.
I'm not AT&T. I was a phone guy, but I'm not AT&T, but I certainly enjoyed listening to that. I'm actually working on a reverse issue to get music to go out over a dial-up conference circuit without getting all distorted. So I might have to work backwards from the way you went.
Oh, always fun, isn't it?
Bob, I'd like to thank you for something.
Okay.
You allowed us to show our videos on your Ham Nation when a lot of people didn't get in. You allowed us to be on, and we really appreciated that. You just can't imagine.
Oh,
the other thing is, I gotta ask you is, do you remember No Donald Ducks and No Quackity Quacks?
Absolutely.
I was there with you.
I just today, do you know who Nick Tusa is?
Oh, sir.
Nick Tusa was a young chap that started working with Wes Shum. You know who Wes Shum was? No? No. Wes Shum, if we had a trivia question right now, and we were going to give $100, who brought single sideband to ham radio? You'd all say Art Collins, wouldn't you? Well, he was 6 years late. It was Wes Shum in 1948 with Central Electronics. And he had a young chap, Nick Tusa, that began working for him, just cleaning things up and so on. And Nick he said, you're the son I never had. Wes had 2 daughters. I've become extremely good friends with Nick. And he's writing kind of a book on Wes. and especially on sideband. And I just finished today. I wrote a chapter on the AM sideband wars. Do you remember those?
Yeah, absolutely. I was right in the middle of it.
And I told the story that I remember it well. One night particular, I mean, they would get into wars because the sidebanders and the AMers didn't want the sidebanders. And when they became apparent on 75 meters, there was this one group, they were awful. They were horrible. And it became a war. So much so, one night, one of those AM guys visited one of the sideband guys. And when the sideband guys opened his front door, the guy standing there with a shotgun. This is a true story. And then it happened, you know, he made his point. He didn't do anything damage yet. There was another one a month or so later, and another AMer went to a sidebander's house and he had an axe. They wanted to make their point. What happened? They all met. I mean, all, but many of them met at Dayton one year and sit down gentlemanly and figured out the gentleman's agreement. 3870 to 3890, 7290 to 7295, and so on. And that was the way it happened back in the late 50s, 60s, up through the 70s. We all respected each other because AMers are crystal controlled. They're not going to move very easily with their vintage gear. Sidebanders can go anywhere they want. Well, after maybe a couple of decades, the new guys that came in the 80s and late 80s, that whole thing degraded and went away because nobody was waving the flag. And I picked it up on Ham Nation 10 years ago, and I got the league to listen a little more. They didn't really even do much with it, but they do have a page somewhere that you can read about it, but you got to dig for it. But I'm really out there trying to help everybody because we're all in this hobby together, and these are very different modes. Now we have FT8, now we have this and that and so on. Just as important as AM, sideband, CW, RTTY, but a lot of guys, they don't know, so they can't pay attention. So they go rocking down the band, land on the, oh, here's a clear spot on 3870. We'll just plant here. Well, no. Well, there's nobody talking, but there could be. And if you come in here and land on that clear frequency, that means the AMer is going to be a gentleman. I guarantee you, we do not have AM stations that are not gentlemen. They really are. And you never hear any of that garbage anymore. They'll just move off. But that was quite something. I just finished that today. So it's interesting that you said something about it. That's great. Good stuff. Anybody else? Don't be shy.
Bob, I think I'm going to get one of your speakers and your parametric boxes for receiving. I'm doing great with the microphone, but you know, I've recently learned you got to turn that RF gain down and cut down the hash. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that RF gain's got to come down.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll tell you what, with my 100 watts, I go right through the pileups with that microphone. It's just amazing. The one thing is I have it kind of set on my 7300. I think I'm a -2 or -3 and a +3 on the treble, -3 or 2 on the
that's
bass.
good. That's good. Yeah, that'd be good.
But I do a lot of DX, so maybe I need to have 2 different settings, you know?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You want to take all the bass out?
DX,
You want to put all the treble you have, and you want to take all the bass out.
Yeah.
And
Gotta
put
get
it in the
Australia.
mid. Put it in the mid transmitter bandwidth.
Yep. I took a
TBW.
picture of your thing, and I'm going to go to the
Yeah.
website and check it all out.
Yep, it'll all be there.
We got a lot of guys. Bill and Barry both have 7300s, and Kent has a 7300. So there are four of us in the club that just recently got 7300s.
Yeah.
And it's a really good radio.
Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, I'm gonna travel on down the road. Thank you for having me, and let's do it again sometime. But please know I'm here anytime. Send me an email, and we'll make it happen.
Thank you, Bob. We appreciate you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Brian, you still in there? Yeah, Brian and Jim, guys, these two guys, I know Brian wants to become a ham for sure, and I think Jim does too. So we need to welcome them to the club, and we're going to have a lot of fun. They're going to have a lot of fun with us. So, Brian, what's your neighbor's name?
Samir. He didn't come in. When I left earlier at the beginning of the call, I went down there. I have his handle if you want me to go grab it in the other room.
Yeah. Right.
I don't know when he's on. But that's like the first person I had ever talked to that had done ham. And then the next thing I'm talking to you about it one day in the office, and I'm like, that's crazy. Like, I can go grab it if you want to hold on a second. I don't know if that's
just text
important
it
or not
later. But we got to get him involved too with us.
Okay.
Yeah, you could be members of multiple clubs, so it's not an issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know what Jim's
Most of us
got?
are.
What Jim has, you know what Jim's got over there? He's got location, location, location.
Well, I think that microphone helps a lot. I'm telling you. I really do. I think it helps me. That's helping it a lot too. I think I got location, resonant antenna, and so anyhow.
Hey Jim, I'm gonna run some coax up to your house.
I was talking about Jim Morton. Jim Morton's got location, location,
Jim
location.
Morton's got location?
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
His face just lit up from his screen.
Okay. Well, we got to get him involved too.
You bet. We had a talk yesterday, didn't we, Jim?
Yes, sir.
Don't call me sir. Do not call me sir.
I want to introduce my friend Roy out in San Diego. Say hello, Roy.
How you doing? It was a great presentation.
Yeah. Your audio dropped out there.
Yeah, I've had internet problems all night long here, so I've been in and out.
Okay.
Every time I get really interested waiting for the answer, it would go away. It was killing me. So did this get recorded? Someplace I can come look at it again?
Yeah. I've got it recorded. In fact, I'm probably going to just go ahead and stop the recording now.